One. Hey everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Buddy Study Group for Worksite Solutions. At least as it shows on my screen, I'm sandwiched in between our two presenters today. So we've got Mark and Wendy, and this will be an interesting session. Every once in a while, we'll do marketing and education sessions that kind of show you a little bit behind the curtain of what we do for implementing enrollments. So Mark and Wendy have graciously agreed to share a little bit about what they do on the employee education front with educational webinars for employees. And I think throughout you'll learn a lot about how that kind of fits into our marketing strategy and should be a pretty nice and well-rounded session. And you'll be able to hear a little bit about maybe what employees are thinking about or asking about when it comes to long-term care plans they're being offered. So I want to start by introducing Wendy because I know there are plenty of you on the call who know Wendy, but there are also probably a number of you who don't. So Wendy is our national account executive here at Buddy INS and does work on the individual and the group side, helping us kind of find, foster, and really make sure that our existing relationships are very strong, helping to update folks, keep them in the loop, and always make sure that we're doing what we can for our key partners here at Buddy INS. And of course, being an Olympic gold medalist and Olympic Hall of Famer and swimmer extraordinaire certainly doesn't hurt anything. So, Wendy, you want to give yourself a little introduction to the group before we get into the content? You'll have to take yourself off mute to do that, though.
There I am. And that does happen to me more often than I should admit. But I know so many of you on this call, and I've had that great opportunity of working with Dale and Christine Jensen, and Diane's here, and Brittany. It's just been a real pleasure. Thank you, Jason, for that introduction. Yes, I'm an Olympian, and I've been also in this industry for 27 years. Really quickly, my story, because we all have one. My parents were my Olympic coaches until I was 18 years old. And standing on that podium with an Olympic gold medal around my neck, looking around in that crowd, trying to find my folks, because that meant so much to them to have and to see that, and to be in Montreal, to see their little girl come from a 6, 7, 8-year-old girl who had this incredible dream that just, I wanted to be the best in the world. And they found a way. They found opportunities for me. I'm one of 7 children. They continued to find opportunities for me in this little tiny 17-yard long swimming pool. And my mother coached me there, and my father did. My mother was a swimmer. My father knew nothing at all about swimming, but read everything that he could about it. And they trained me. They just figured it out. I swam my summers in a lake with my father following me in a rowboat. He had made lane lines for me. He had made a flip turn board in the lake for me. I mean, it was just a great experience. These were 2 hardworking Midwestern parents who became extraordinary parents and coaches. And so when my father needed care shortly after Montreal, I saw what happened to our family. I saw what happened to my mom. I saw the amount of strain physically, financially, emotionally on her. Being one of 7 kids, I was 23 years old when my father needed care. We all had our careers in any state but Wisconsin. And so trying to help her out was just really, it was just almost impossible, really. We could go and spend a few days here and there, but really the brunt was on my mom. When my father finally passed away at the very old age of 66, and needing care for quite a number of years, and watching that unfold, it had a profound effect on me. It absolutely did. And I thought, God, you know what? How is that possible? How does a man who trained me to the meter of an Olympic gold medal not figure this part out? I could not get my head around that. And so I decided once my kids were a little older, I got to find out about this. There's got to be another way than spending your life savings and having your kids in a panic trying to figure this crap out. And so I came into the long-term care industry. I had a great friend that brought me in. It was American Express, then it was GE. So it was 1997, actually, the end of 97. And I loved it. I loved listening to people's stories because they all have one. Theirs is really no different than mine. Names are different, places are different, states are different, but they all went through what I went through. And so for me to be a part of something so great that helps so many people on such a big level has been, honestly, it's my dream. It's my next Olympics. Being in that industry as an agent, as a wholesaler, I had done that for 20 years. I met Mark Glickman a number of years ago, and he and I did a few webinars together when I was a wholesaler. And then when he started up Buddy a couple years ago, Mark gave me a call, said, Wendy, let's do a webinar together. And I said, oh, great. What are we doing it on? He goes, no, it's after COVID. Let's just put something together. I have started this company. And he told me all about it. And I said, absolutely. We did a webinar. And honestly, Mark, I've always, you know how much I admire you and what you put together and the team that you put together. It was a no-brainer for me to be a part of this great team and to help as many people as we can. I primarily, as Jason said, I'm on the independent, traditional long-term care side, but really I love where I'm at with group because I can help so many more people, both on the life side and the long-term care side at the really young ages and ages of people that are in the workforce just like me at my age at 69. So it's been an honor and a pleasure. I absolutely love working with all of you, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Wendy, and sharing a bit more of the personal side of why you're here and just the depth of your experience that you have in the industry. And we obviously appreciate you so much as well. Um, so I want to talk to you both about some of the education that you're bringing to employees because it's hard unless you have kind of gotten a group under your belt or you've been working behind the scenes with an enrollment to really be able to attend one of these webinars. I want to get an idea of, you know, the content that you're talking about and how it might differ from other webinars that, you know, frankly, we give 2 days a week on the study group. Of course, you're dealing with employees whose long-term care experience runs the gamut. So I would love to get a little bit of insight into what you guys are generally talking about, how it may differ from group to group, and how you try to keep them fun, because I do know that is one of the bullet points.
Yeah, I would say fun and authentic. And I think, Wendy, that was a great lead-in because everyone could tell how authentic it was, right? How the emotion in your voice when you told your personal story. That's exactly what we do on these webinars too. Because you have to make that connection and the audience will pay attention if you care, right? So I think, you know, I oftentimes also share my personal story and, you know, every webinar we do is very similar in that that has to be the lead-in, I think, to those webinars to really get people to pay attention. But we can kind of go through, Jason, yeah, more of the step by step. But I would say that's the number one thing is if you're comfortable with it, if you're speaking to the group authentic, then you're going to have good results. So that to me is the number one thing. Wendy,
And
any
Wendy, how
thoughts on
about for
Yeah,
you?
totally agree. And each group is different. Mark and I've done it with several hundred on a call, and then we've done different groups with 12 that are all ER funded, right? And so they all get engaged. The big piece is pulling them in. I just want you to know I don't cry in my webinars like I did just going through this, because that would be just really bad. But I do tell my story. I think what Mark and I do is we keep it light, we keep it informative. He and I have this rhythm because we've been doing, God, last week I think we did 5. So we do a lot of them, and again, they're all different, and it's really learning who your audience is, understanding what the audience wants based on what HR has told us and that relationship that we have with them and the broker that's brought us that group. And Mark, are you going to show the slides, the little slideshow?
Yeah, we can kind of just give it the outline. We won't go through
Yeah,
the whole
yeah,
presentation, but and you know, like Wendy has her specialty, which is really motivating people to take action to form a plan. And we always talk about that the purpose of these presentations is to get somebody to do a plan. It's not about buying an insurance product, but everyone wants to know about the benefit and about the cost and value. And of course, that's kind of my what I like to focus in on, right, is the numbers and the cost and the value. So we'll show you kind of how we combine those two together. Um, so this is just a sample presentation, sample Prezi, but you can see the outline is right here in terms of, you know, like how we go through the steps. You can do these in a lot of different orders, of course. And, you know, usually we're doing that intro and then we're going into what is long-term care. So the intro is about personal stories and it kind of fits right into, transitions well into the what is long-term care and caregiving topics. So that's where we're highlighting a lot of the key rationales for why you would want to plan. So again, it's just like you would do for a one-to-one individual presentation, right? We're establishing the need. Usually the people we're talking to are at a very early level of awareness about this because they didn't ask for this. Their employer is bringing it to them proactively. And so we have to explain to them why this topic is so important and why this is different than their major medical enrollment and their other voluntary benefits. Usually the first time we do this is off cycle, so it's really a dedicated event only on long-term care and not on anything else. But we have to go through that LTC 101. So, you know, we do define long-term care. Wendy doesn't let me do a webinar without talking about what are the two of six ADLs, but we do it in a way that people aren't thinking about disease, death, and dying, right? It's
yeah.
about living a high quality life. We talk about the positive aspects of why planning is important. Of course, the CLTC approach, right? Why it's important to protect your family. And, you know, thinking about getting them to start thinking about their own personal story and why this would resonate with them. Then we go into who provides care and we kind of break it down into an issue that is solvable with a number of different resources, right? Your family is a part of the solution, but so is self-funding, so is the insurance product. And then we talk about why the government is likely not a solution, right? So again, it's demystifying the FAQs, right, that we always hear from clients and helping them bring awareness to that. And then we get into, you know, kind of, we do a break midway through, like on this presentation, we talk about like kind of some questions. We take live questions, which is always great to do when you have a live audience. And then we get into cost of care analysis. We get into the benefit itself. So as you go through those topics, there's a lot of layers, and it does take time to get through all of those layers with especially a new audience. But we can usually do in about 30 minutes or less, get through the main topics. Um, and the benefit itself, usually most of the questions are about the product. So when I go get into that product, I'm usually bringing up Benefit Buddy, and as you guys know, and usually we'll have a landing page for the groups with education. We'll usually have a version of Benefit Buddy right on that educational website. So when I take them through the product, I'm actually walking them through Benefit Buddy, you know, looking at sample age, looking at that cost value. This really motivates them to realize that this is not just like a premium that you're going to get reimbursed. You know, some insurance, you know, you're kind of getting almost like a reimbursement of what you put into it. You're getting leverage here. You're getting guarantees here. That's where I talk about all of those different facets. And I think that's really kind of the meat of what most people want to know about is why should I pay attention and participate on this thing?
And
So
I
I think
think,
we have
go
good
ahead,
outcomes because of, you know, just really diving deep, being authentic and not like withholding what they really want to know is what is this going to cost me at the end of the
right.
day?
And you pulled that so well. Mark being, as we know, a numbers guy, Mark tends to like to get into that. But people respond to that because they're like, hey, would you plug age 52 in there? And Mark's like, yeah, I'll put 52 in there. I think when I look at this, we always get a question because Mark will put in the current age and they'll go, you know, what if you need care at 70? And so unless you really explain it, we usually get one on every call. What if I need care at 82, Mark? So I mean, it's really, there's some that there's always one that goes, wait, why is that done at 70? So I think the explanation part is really important so people can play with the numbers, and Mark does it often. We'll put in different ages. The things that people love on the group side, as you can imagine, is a guaranteed issue and the unisex pricing. So we do tend to talk about that a number of times as we go through this.
Yeah. And people ask questions, so like listen to those questions. They'll say like, well, what happens if I need care right away instead of age
Right.
70, right? It's obvious to us that the product will cover them, but we have to make sure that they understand that, yeah, if you need care at a younger age, like if you need care in 5 years, you're going to get, that much more value from the plan, right? So it's not like we're cherry picking and only showing, one scenario, right? This is really kind of regardless of what happens, it's going to be a decent deal for you. I think there's also understand the audience, like Wendy was talking about early, is really important. Because if we're working with more of an engineering audience, I will definitely get more technical and get more into the weeds. And we will get very technical questions, but it's not to be afraid of those. It's just to understand your audience that they want to know that. If they're, a higher percentage of female populations, which we oftentimes have groups because of long-term care being a female issue, we talk more about unisex pricing and, we kind of highlight those features even more. So the more you know about the audience allows you to decide what part of this presentation you want to give and how much you drill into the numbers. We don't do it scripted the same way, like Wendy said, each time. Each group is a little different.
Yeah, and I know you haven't you can't really structure things like you're going to have an advanced audience, but do you ever, I'm sure that it runs the gamut between any employer that you could be presenting to or any association you could be presenting to, but do you find certain groups to be a bit more overeducated or undereducated based on your expectations? And I think for the groups that you may find are asking questions that are kind of out in left field, do you find it difficult to kind of pull them into what really matters about these products and long-term care planning in general?
I think because it's set up so well in the beginning, what Mark and I start with, that the flow is really nice. Very rarely, and I was just thinking, what is the most strangest question, Mark, that you and I have ever gotten, that you and I after are like, oh my God, I can't believe that person asked that. There really hasn't been any of those. We get, but to answer your question, there's a fair amount of teachers that we love because they are already educated. They are, and most of them, to Mark's point, are women, so they understand the value. I think the confusion can happen if it's not set up right, is the life and long-term care piece.
Mm-hmm.
I show it as this great dual benefit, right? They've got, and plus Mark and I are talking to young men and women that are anywhere from 22 to 45 could be one of our groups. So that life side where they haven't bought life insurance before, this adds that value to them. And then they start thinking with the long-term care, God, what an incredible benefit to have this dual benefit. And I think I see that more and more as our webinars go on with questions on that. Inflation is another one. And Mark talks about it greatly on the life side and why that question. And also, Mark, how come we can count on a level premium? Because that question always comes up.
Yeah, and actually, I was kind of thinking of the same thing. We do get questions about what about inflation protection. When someone asks that question, you know that they've researched long-term care insurance before, right? Yeah. So what's usually happening is they've had a legacy plan, a Genworth plan, a Unum plan. So the groups that come in with knowledge are the ones that have had previous insurance offered to them. Everyone else comes out with the same level of knowledge for the most part, not really understanding the insurance market. And to Wendy's point, explaining the hybrid benefit in the right way and in a simple way is really important because most of the group market is hybrids and those oftentimes have the best value. But I do it the same way we talk about this on the study group each week, which is we focus on the long-term care first. What's the value for the dollar for long-term care? Why is the life insurance there? To provide guarantees, to provide a minimum that you get back as long as you keep it. And what I try to emphasize to them is the only way to not get value out of the policy is to buy it and to drop it. So buy what you can afford to keep. And it's the same message we would give to an individual client, right? And that's also gets them comfortable that we're not trying to get them to be, to protect their pocketbook, right? It really helps. And HR loves it too, right? We're not like trying to upsell them or do things like that. We're really trying to give them, how do you make sure you have the best value? So if they know that, hey, the worst case scenario is I pay for this and I keep it, I'm going to get value out of the policy. I think that also goes a long way to getting people to want to participate if they're on the fence.
Yeah, and that's a good point that you make, Mark. And also, I really like the point where you discussed that the audience may come in, having a mindset around insurance that they're just getting reimbursed, right? Some don't even really understand that this could give you X amount of times more money out in benefit than you put in premium. I think that's like something we just kind of take for granted in the being in the insurance industry and particularly long-term care. So I really like that. But also just, talking about not coming at it from a sales oriented angle or trying to pressure people into buying something that they may not be able to keep comfortably. I know there's a difference, and I know there are separate webinars that you guys have for employer funded cases, with those who are actually being funded, whether it be the whole group for a small plan or some sort of executive carve out. That differs from the voluntary space, right? So how does the dynamic for you and your guys' objectives
Yeah.
differ between those two?
Well, one of the really key points, and I kind of alluded to it in the presentation, is when we cover the cost of care, it shows scary numbers, especially when you project inflation to the future. And letting them know that even covering an hour or two of care is going to have a great positive impact for their family is key. So most of those, full base plan, like when the employer is funding it for everybody, it's a really small policy. So two things we try to accomplish. One is to convey the value of what the employer is doing for them, and they're actually endorsing this. Sometimes the CEO gets on the call and says, here's why I'm spending this money to take care of you in this way, which obviously is great to have that testimonial of someone they know, right there. But also to let them know that this is going to cover a starter plan. It's okay because you can combine that with self-funding or family, right? It's still going to be valuable for you, but here's why you might want to do more. So most always when we're doing the education, it's about what the value the employer is providing, and here's why you may want to consider more if you're in a situation where this means more to you. And I would say our voluntary parts of those enrollments are one of the big reasons we do education. When we do the employer funding, our voluntary participation doubles and triples.
Yeah.
So it really does go a long way. And that's how you get this product and have good results for smaller groups. So the executive carve out, Jason, is a little bit of a different type of concept. Usually we do a separate meeting with just the executives. Again, because the employees don't want to feel left out that they're not getting access or paid for. So usually we're doing two separate meetings to talk about the executive plan, and then we're usually doing voluntary for everyone. We have a separate webinar for them.
Yeah, I think it's super important that you guys aren't just talking about, especially in executive carve-out cases, here's what you're getting, have a nice day, right? It's so important that they understand what they have in the context of the entirety of long-term care planning and what their options are, including and beyond what they're being offered. So it really is talking about full spectrum long-term care planning, right? Not just, oh, we've kind of reached whatever premium we can extract out of what your employer's purchased for you. So we'll just kind of stop there and have a nice day, right?
Yeah. I would also mention that your relationship with HR and with the company, you want to leverage that. Usually they're on the webinar with us. They become product experts with us through the process of doing the enrollment. So when we kick off the webinars, usually it's the HR team that's actually presenting the benefit, because they're so knowledgeable about it. And that way also people don't have to wait until the end to learn about the product. They want to just go in for the first 10 minutes, hear what the benefit is, and they have to leave or something like that. They've got at least that covered before we get into kind of the need analysis. So I'm a big believer in not making people wait to get to the punchline. If all they're concerned about is what is this going to cost me, kind of let that tension out early on, and that can be a good way of doing it too. Sorry, Wendy, you have something?
No, that was,
Okay.
you said it exactly. I want to hone back though on the women. And I know it's long-term care and life, and it's that hybrid. I get it, and women get it. But very few women out in the workforce that have kids at home and are out in the workforce have life insurance. So this appeals to them. They totally understand long-term care. They get it. They will do that. But then the life is this added bonus. I always crack up. I was watching TV the other night again, and there's this ad, there's this husband and wife, and they're like, I don't know, they're like, Andy, wait, they're like your age, but they're sitting there, and the husband is looking at the wife, and she's saying, hey, honey, do you have life insurance? Because John next door just passed away, was 48 years old. And the husband is going, no, should I be getting that? Like, you never see an ad where the husband is saying, honey, you should get life insurance. So I always tend on the webinars, and I don't hound it. It's a subtle thing, but it is so critical. I had a very good friend, Mark knows this, who passed away but almost 3 months ago. No life insurance, worked in the workforce, had 3 kids, has 3 kids under the age of 19 years old. No life insurance. Like, it's devastating. And I think women don't think of that. And women and men on this call, I just think you have to bring that up. And certainly in the group Mark and I do, not in a salesy way, but it flows through there.
I got to use your line though, Wendy. Wendy's got a great line. I've learned so many stories and lines from Wendy on these webinars. But one of them is Bernie, right? Wendy's husband. Do you know how many people it would take to replace me? What I do for this family, right? When you think of it that way, hey, we're gonna need a lot of money to cover that cost. So, you know, again, really understanding that stereotype, right?
Yeah.
Especially when you're talking about, like, you know, DEI initiatives and more women in the workforce and having to leave the workforce to be caregivers.
Right.
The issues that we talk about really resonate with not just HR, but with employees at large. You have to kind of bring up those issues and make people care about wanting to address them.
And they all have their stories. And Mark, where you and I, every once in a while, someone on the call will share their story. Hey, my mother, or I just took care of my husband or my dad or whatever. Every single one has a story, and that's why they're there. And what we help them do is help them identify that, yes, we all have a story, and how can you make that different? I mean, if my mother went through Alzheimer's care for 4 years, 3 months, and 31 days. It was at the time $8,600 a month, and she passed away in 2015. So you're talking in 2011, beginning of 2011. And when Mark talks about, and people pay attention, even $1,000, $1,000, a couple hours of care a day, 1 hour of care a day makes such an impact for that caregiver, hugely. I mean, I say it so often, I love tuna fish, I do, but I'm not eating that 3-4 times a day. So I can buy a long-term care policy. A group policy allows you to have a really level premium with some coverage, because some coverage with a great company is better than nothing. And you and I, all of us on this call, know that. I think something is better than nothing, and $1,000 a month goes a long way.
People will buy more, by the way.
They do.
See that value. They will buy 4, 6, 8, 12,000 a month from these plans for sure.
I was gonna ask what your experience is in the works like. Everybody, you know, their $1 million question is, well, I'm too young. What age should I start this at? You know, da 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 da. And what I did a call the other day, and there was a guy in the insurance business. I said, I've got clients that are in their 30s that want to get it, but some of the plans we can't do it. You know, I have clients that are 30 to, like, you know, 80 years old, 75 years old. The guy's like, well, 30 is way too young to do it. I said, I've had in the last, I'm not exaggerating, in the last 6 months, I've had an 83-year-old client's daughter at age 52 diagnosed early onset dementia, cognitive impairment. I have a close friend of mine whose brother-in-law, who I know very well, hardcore hockey player, 51 years old, got up similar to what happened to my dad. For those you know, my dad can't feel the whole left side of his frickin' body. Massive stroke. He's now down rehabilitating, and they don't know what the hell is going to happen to him. He's lucky he comes from a family with a lot of money. Friend at 48 diagnosed with Parkinson's. This is all in 6 months, just in my little circle. And they're not movie stars. They're not people out there. So people need to realize that this problem, age does not discriminate against this crap. And
exactly right.
You know, so I just say, yeah. So that's kind of what I kind of want to throw out there to people, that Yeah, that needs to stop already, that there's no real age. It's like, when is the time in your life to do this? And I just, people wait beyond the time to do it, and then they're basically screwed.
Yeah, we actually cover those exact questions during
Yep.
our FAQ in the middle, because people also want to know that they're getting benefits for the here and the now.
Yep.
That's a big deal, right? They always think I can wait, if we're looking at age 70 or age 80, right? I can wait.
Right.
But having it for now, and we talk about why buying younger, buying earlier
Yeah.
is a good idea, and there's a bunch of reasons, locking in rates, but protecting your insurability, so you may not qualify for something later. And yeah, you might need it, so might as well get a little bit to hedge that. So
And it
again,
doesn't even need to
a lot
be
of
anything like unbelievably
Exactly.
life altering either. It can be some sort of accident that's recoverable, right? At the end of the day, to be able to have a couple of hours of care for something like that, even I think a lot of people don't think that long-term care policies can be there for you in that way, right? All you have to do is fall
Exactly.
off a ladder and need 90 plus days of care, and that plan will be able to help you there. And that's something that Steve Elliott said on a recent study group presentation he did for us. One of the objections he tries to take away very early on in the conversation is, do I really need to have Alzheimer's or dementia, or do I need to have, nursing home care for the rest of my life to have a policy pay out for me? No. And I think that misconception also has people waiting a little bit.
yeah.
Right.
I have 14 clients on claim right now. At any given time, I'll have 5 or 6. I mean, I've been in the industry 27 years, so I've got a lot of clients on claim. Not one of them is over the age of 75. 11 of the 14 are women. So when I came into the industry, it was the 40 and 42 and 44-year-old men and women that I sold policies to, because they saw it with their own folks, and it was less expensive at those ages. So which is why my clients on claim are in those 60s and 70s. Then I have clients who are on the opposite end, 97, 98. I was telling Mark the other day, my 98-year-old client, she's just a kicker. She said to me a couple times over the last year and a half, Wendy, I'm almost 100, but I feel like I'm 83. I mean, you've got the gamut, and I think we do a great disservice. And this is the industry, because the industry has always positioned this as the bag lady. If you don't get insurance, if you do not buy insurance, you're going to end up in an old folks home, in a nursing home, and you're going to be all alone, and you're not going to have any money, or you're going to be walking the streets as homeless. I came into the industry and I understood very, very well, this is not about getting old. This is about today. If you needed care today, what's that plan? And Mark and I talk about it all the time. Insurance could just be one part. I think the bigger conversation when I'm talking to groups and we have these webinars is to have a plan in place, because without it, you leave enormous decisions to make, which is, Brian, exactly what you're talking about. I mean, Andy, wait, you and I've had conversations where there are clients out there, there's men and women out there that are young with this and are thinking about, what if this happened to me? Remember, 37% of people needing care today are younger than me, and I'm 69. So this isn't something that yes, we're going to need it at 80, 90, and 100 years old, whether we're walking upright or shuffling around with a walker. We are going to need care. I'm a fit Olympic gold, silver, bronze medalist. I watch everything I eat. I exercise. I move. I do everything right. But I'm not immune to anything that happens out there in terms of a disease or a cancer or anything else. So this to me is about living. How can I help as many people as I can going forward to live a good quality of life, regardless of the care that they need? This is about not helping people die. This is about helping people have quality of life and live.
Yeah, and I kind of, Jason, want to transition into how to get people to the webinars, because I think that's like half the battle, is making sure
Yep.
people show up. But one way to do that, and it'll kind of segue here, is we often will have someone from HR that it tells their personal story on our webinars. Sometimes even when we don't plan it, they will just raise their hand and they'll say, you guys have to pay attention to this because this is what happened to me. But we also do videos, and we also have ways to incorporate people that are trusted to get them in front of the employees, to get more people to want to attend this in the first place. So I don't know if you want to dive more into that, or
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I know getting people to webinars is definitely going to vary based on the group that you are in front of, be it employer or non-employer, but also just depending on the culture of the employer that you're speaking with, right? What is the relationship with HR like, or how much are the executives actually pushing the benefits and engagement and participation has a lot to do with that. And we've seen, really both sides of it. But I guess, yeah, I guess we can start by any thoughts on your end as to uh, how to maybe start to move the needle on that culture a little bit if it's not already.
Yeah, I would say, well, the biggest thing is if you get employer funding, and if you're working especially with smaller groups, you really have to, you need employer funding, then HR will require everyone to come to the webinar.
Yep.
Yep.
It'll be mandatory. And when we have that happen, yeah, 70, 80% of the employees, we had, 200 employee groups that 150 people show up
Yep.
live. So that's really what it takes to get people to want to like pay attention to this is, yeah, HR is saying you really need to do this. They're carving out work time also to give you access, right? So, people are kind of incentivized to attend. So I think that's the biggest thing that I found with those particular groups. With groups that are all voluntary, it is more challenging. Obviously, outside of the open enrollment is a big reason why they do it, but we usually do a lot of planning with HR to send out multiple emails, 4, 5, 6 emails. When we promote it that way and HR is really on board with that, we do get good results. We had a group that was about 24,000 employees. We've had 2 actually enrollments with them now. We had one last year. We just finished one this year. And the first one, we had 2,500 people register for the webinars, right? And there were like in total, I would say half of those, like 1,200 showed up live.
Yeah.
And of course, all the others got the recording. So that's a great audience to influence. Again, not as high of a percentage, but in terms of the total number is great. We did a second enrollment for them. Same results. Another, probably we had another 500 to 1,000 that showed up live to these webinars. We've had other groups though that have 35,000 employees where we had 20 people show up.
Yeah.
What do you think the difference is? People
Marketing.
either know about it and culturally they're coming to these types of events, or they're not getting it communicated to them, right? And it's just something that they don't pay attention to from their employer. But you really have to work with HR because that really tells you whether you're going to have success. We can predict, what the number of registrants are going to be based on the marketing that leads into it.
Yeah, not just working with HR, but having their trust as well, right? If you have the trust and you can tell them, hey, attendance to these webinars is more important than you may think. So any sort of effort we can get help with to get that importance across is going to have really good implications for the enrollment. If you have that trust, they can flip a switch and if not say this is very important, say everybody's got to be there.
Yeah, you have to ask for help. That's a great point,
right.
Jason, is, and they're motivated to make this successful. I think that's really important to realize is HR is judged based on the participation on the benefits that they offer. So they're your biggest cheerleader because if more people pay attention, they get more accolades, right? Because it was worthwhile putting this program in place. If nobody shows up, if nobody participates, senior leadership question, why did we do this in the first place?
Yeah. And
Right.
Why do we
developing
waste
that
our time?
relationship, having that relationship with HR, being in those meetings and continue to be in those meetings so you can develop that relationship with them and then take it to the next level. The ones that fall apart are the ones that you hand off too quickly. And no, you gotta be authentic, be engaging, show them the value. People are taking their time away from work to be on a webinar and giving them that value, but having that trust. And that goes back from that broker to working with the HR and being involved with them right from the beginning and all the way through.
And if they're not part of that carve out group, if there's an executive carve out, they'll be one of, if not the first person to purchase a plan.
Right.
Not only for their own, personal benefit, but also to help their metrics, right?
Yep.
At the end of the day. So I think if the HR team doesn't have any questions well, that's a pretty bad sign for me, because they're generally going to want to find out for themselves. But I think the HR teams that have a lot of questions can generally lead to the best relationships, because they see the lengths you go through to get a lot of these questions answered. You know, if they have a number of preferences that you're able to meet, if they can understand that you want to make things fit with the way they do things culturally, like all of those asks and all of those questions really make you think, you know, we've got a good group here, right? Because they're going to take action on those questions. They're going to be armed to answer those questions if employees have them, and they're going to understand how far they've come in their knowledge to know why it's important to get people on these webinars.
When
Yeah,
on so many of those, and I just want to pull in Gretchen, because her marketing is extraordinary, what she does. Absolutely extraordinary. When her hand can get in it, and that can be a fight, because a lot of these companies want to do it themselves. They've done it this way. We do open enrollments every single August through November. We don't need any help. And those are the ones that can fall flat. But when you can get a Gretchen in there with her hand in there, and those are the questions that she asks, how does your culture normally work? So I would just like to hear it from Gretchen as well, because Mark, I mean, right, Gretchen, you just work your magic. It's just so extraordinary.
Oh, thank you, Wendy. You are too kind.
Oh, you're good. You're so good.
I don't have the best connection, so hopefully I'm coming through okay. But yeah, let me back up a little bit. Let me rewind this a touch. When we're working with, if you're working with us, we're in the trenches. We're having those conversations like Wendy and Mark and Jason were mentioning. We're having those conversations with the HR representative, the benefits people. We're all there together trying to build the best experience. So yes, we do a lot of sort of deep dives into what are the best channels for communicating to the employees or association members. On the employer side, yeah, if it's employer funded and you know that's the easy one for me. It's when it's all voluntary or it's an association, and that's when you know the real challenge happens, and you really have to do your work on helping those leaders get comfortable with the story and telling a story. And that's where, you know, if you have someone, if you can identify someone in the organization who can tell their story in like a short video that can be used to then promote the webinar, that's the ideal. It's a challenge to get there, but that is definitely the ideal. If it's somebody that the organization as a whole is familiar with, and that person they see that person telling an intimate story about a caregiving experience or some experience with long-term care, that's the ideal. And so that's what we try to do. And then beyond that, just sort of, I think you guys have probably heard me say this before, just sort of building that journey of discovery to help people understand the need, because they, like we all know, they don't know. So
yeah, that's one of the nice things though about the digital marketing realm is you can put together a short video very easily on a Zoom, record it, you know, and it's much more accessible to do those things now, and they're much more effective because they stand out from that traditional, like Wendy was saying, open enrollment content is going to look different. So this is going to stand out and people will pay more attention to it that way too. We record every webinar, and that's really important as well, to realize that people will share it with their spouse. They'll redistribute it. Some of our groups don't want to do a live webinar. They just actually have us do a recorded webinar that they can promote for people to listen to on their own time. We prefer to do it live and then record it, but there's a lot of flexibility because it's quicker and easier to do it, you know, in a remote way.
I think that word you just said, flexibility, is important. We try to be nimble around the webinars, so that I mean, we've had organizations come back and say, hey, can you do another one? Either people didn't get a chance to go on the first one, or there are a lot of people with a lot of questions, even after seeing the new webinar. So we jump on another webinar, and then Wendy and Mark are answering questions that people have. So I think, the fact that we can be nimble and flexible, and that's important too.
And just
Huge.
knowing your audience, knowing the product solution. And we do a lot with Trustmark, we do Allstate, we do run the gamut, but really knowing that. And Mark, I got to say, Mark, he just always amazes me. Depth of knowledge, is just his insight, all of that. And I'm not blowing smoke, Mark, because I know this stuff, and I listen to you, and people I know their head is spinning around on their shoulders because you know so much.
Yeah, well, there's two aspects to that. One is that the employees don't ask that complex of questions, so you shouldn't be afraid. You are the product expert. In fact, if you're on this study group, you're more product expert than 99.9% of all financial professionals, let alone consumers. So it's just important to realize that the questions that they're going to ask you are kind of a lot of the same questions that you'll hear all the time. When we get some of the more nuanced questions, Wendy, it's okay to not have every single answer. It's nice when you do, but it's okay to say, let me talk to the insurance company, get back to you. Let me review the contract and get back to you. It just shows that you're doing that work for them, that they can trust the recommendation you're making. So either way it is, I think anybody on this call is capable of giving a webinar. As long as you're authentic, you make it fun and interesting to attend. That's the one area where you won't have success is if you try to make it too scripted, right? And if you're nervous on it, you have to have that confidence to do a good presentation.
And it takes a lot of them. I mean, you need to, if you get over one or two, believe me, it's like when you and I sit down with a client, think of back your very first time that you sat with a couple. And it was I just remember mine at the kitchen table of a couple so well. But every single time that you do it, you perfected that, and you could listen and understand what really mattered the most to those clients. On these webinars, it's no different. It's absolutely no different than you're talking to.
I think it's easier personally because, like, if you have 500 people on, right, it's kind of nerve-wracking. You have an audience of 500 people you're speaking to on stage. You're on Zoom. You're just looking at me and Wendy are just looking at each other, and maybe the co-presenters, the HR people on the call. It's not that nerve-wracking. We like to have people turn on their cameras and participate and get involved with it. But most of the time they're typing into the chat, the questions and things like that. So I think it's a more comfortable environment.
And they typically want to talk to a specialist, right, Jason? I mean, we see that all the time.
You took the segue right out of my mouth.
I'm good.
Well, no, keep going. Keep going.
No, that's what I was
you have to say
at the end. And Mark does a great job because at the end of our webinars, depending on actually it's every one of our group carriers, there is a place for them to go if they want to talk to somebody, even for 15 minutes. And it's not on commission. So and Mark spells that out really clearly because people do have other questions. They have private questions. They have a different situation. Even if it's a guaranteed issue, they have a spouse or a partner that might not qualify even on SI. So they want to talk to somebody, and we give them that opportunity to do that in a very non-threatening, come into the room and we can help you with that.
Yeah, super important aspect to this that I think kind of goes not understated, but bears mentioning is that, like Wendy said, I don't think questions just stop when the Q&A session ends after the webinar. There are plenty of questions that people don't feel comfortable asking in front of all of their coworkers, and it's not like they're very into intimate health questions or anything like that. But hey, I have a personal policy myself already, and I want to see if this is any good to add on to it, but I really need somebody to take a look at it. Or just for employees to know that we're not just going to have this webinar, take some questions, answer 17 out of 50 questions, and then just drop it and you'll never hear from us again. I think the continuity of conversation that's being offered by that transition that you guys make, and of course the specialists that work with us on group enrollments for you know, really being consultative in there, even if they are simple questions. Generally just taking that 15 minutes with somebody individually, and that person knowing that they're meeting with, you know, a top specialist, you know, across the country for long-term care. Wow, made available for little old me and my little old questions. That really does make a heck of a lot of difference. It helps people feel seen, and at the end of the day, they generally take the advice when, you know, a specialist is able to tell them, hey, with no medical underwriting or very limited medical underwriting and affordable rates, this is something that is worth purchasing as much as it's comfortable for you, you know? And just knowing that you have that kind of white glove service, again, it just makes the group feel as if they're employees, and everybody, you know, that's a part of the workplace is taken care of, but each individual feels really well taken care of as well. So it's
HR
always
loves
a
that.
pleasure to offer. Yeah.
HR loves it, the company loves it, the employer loves it, because he knows his company is going to be in great hands to see it all the way through. To your point, it doesn't just end at the webinar. It can for many, but most people pick up the phone and want to talk to somebody a little further.
Yep. Get it all out, right? Get it
Yep.
all out while you can, you know?
That's right.
I mean, oftentimes marketing starts a little ahead of the enrollment period, but otherwise you got 30 days to make a decision. So, you know, get in with somebody and just have a chat, right? That makes a world of difference. I know I am somebody like that too. If I have a limited time frame to make a decision on something, I want a quick, easy process that's going to get me straight to somebody who's going to answer 3 of my questions and make me feel a lot better. And then I just go and take the next step, right? And I think that's a lot of what that piece of it delivers. And they don't know it exists sometimes unless they have this webinar attendance and really hear it from you and from Mark. And if they don't get to the webinars, they may not find any of this out. So you can see how it all works in this gigantic marketing and education chain, right? You got to make sure each link of that chain is super strong because they all feed off of each other. Yeah, do you guys have anything you want to bring up to wrap it up to the group? Wendy, anything you want to say before we give Gretchen some time to talk about what's new?
I think we covered it all on my end.
All righty. Awesome. Well, thank you guys for giving us a little look into what you're doing day in and day out with employees. We certainly appreciate all the work you guys put in, because there are a heck of a lot of them, especially lately. And yeah, Gretchen,
Thanks.
the floor is yours. We're giving you more than 2 minutes, like weeks and weeks in a row now.
I know, that's very good. Yeah, we're on the cover of California Broker Magazine this month for Long-Term Care Awareness Month, so check that out. There's a link to it on my LinkedIn profile, so if you follow me on LinkedIn, check it out. We basically took over the whole magazine, or most of the magazine, which was super cool. And then the other thing, next week at this time is our webinar. So I think I told you guys last week, if you were on last week, this is basically our soup to nuts webinar that will explain the group process from start to finish. So pretty much all of us in these corners here are going to be on with talking about some piece of the group process, whether it's employer or association. So look for that. And you should be getting emails about the webinar. If you have not been getting those emails, you can find the link to it on our on the homepage of our website. So I hope to see you here next week, same time.
Yeah, and I want to mirror what Mark said. You know, being on these study groups, you have such a knowledge advantage over the rest of the financial field, and any employee, business owner, HR executive, whoever you could be talking to. But, you know, a good way to start that conversation and reach out to more referral partners is to get them in and show them what kind of education you're getting on the group space, and to be able to offer them a little peek into the world that might not take them too deep into the weeds. So if you have somebody that you're trying to get a hold of who you think working with them might be able to give you a jump start or a leg up in meeting some groups, invite them to this. There's a link that you can send to them. They can add it to their calendar. You know, they can register for the webinar next week and show them a little bit about what you're being educated on week in and week out, right? Great way to say hello and great way to parlay that into a conversation of how can we work together.
Here it is right here. So yeah, send it to your peeps and have them register to join us. Oh, one more thing. Wait, before you leave, we do have a new group page. I might have shown this last week. Just go to Join Buddy INS, click group. And this explains everything that we offer for the group process and group sales. So yeah.
Check it
What's
out.
going on? Check it out.
It's very pretty. Lots of moving pictures
Very
and
pretty.
cool
Yeah.
animations.
Beautiful.
And when you scroll down, things go shh, and that's really cool. But there's a lot of really good information on there too. Thank you all for being here with us. And if you watch the recording, we appreciate you having watched. We are getting a lot of feedback of people watching our recordings. We really appreciate that. And we will see you next week. To the webinar, folks. Have a good one.
Bye.
Be well.